What has caused 2 wars lasting 7 years, directly involved the victims of 2 further wars, separated by 200 years of history, diverted Chinese workers from building the US railways, upset Egyptologists, inspired this cartoon, killed 1 million Irishmen, women and children, excited paleontologists, and made the world's smallest republic the richest in the world, and then bankrupt again in the space of a couple of decades. It is arguably the most valuable resource on the planet, and yet you are pissing it away. In 19th century Britain, science, technology and agriculture came together. Science explained that crops needed the correct nutrients to grow. The Industrial Revolution moved people away from agriculture to urban centres. The population trebled. A need to improve soils and increase crop yields by the application of phosphates became an urgent concern. Phosphorus is essential for plant growth and therefore for all life on Earth. Plants take up the phosphorus from the soil. We eat the plants, or an animal which eats the plants. We metabolize a small amount of the phosphorus, and then, quite literally, we piss the rest away. It's widely estimated that 2/3 of the world's population are able to eat only because of the phosphorus which is added to agricultural soils. Early on, bone meal was discovered to be a good source of phosphates. The problem being, of course, that there was never enough bone meal to grow enough crops for an expanding population. In the UK, bones were big business, and when the slaughterhouses could not keep up, bones were imported from the battlefields of Europe. This led to one commentator expressing that the neighbourhood of Leipzig, Austerlitz, Waterloo, and of all the places where during the late bloody war the principal battles were fought, have been swept alike of the bones of the hero and of the horse which he rode. Thus collected from every quarter, they have been shipped to Hull and thence forwarded to the Yorkshire bone grinders. And he ends with, "It is certainly a singular fact that Great Britain should have sent out such multitudes of soldiers to fight the battles of this country upon the continent of Europe, and should then import their bones as an article of commerce to fatten her soil." How much truth is there in this, I cannot tell you. A quote attributed to the chemist Baron Liebig runs, "Great Britain was like a ghoul searching the continents for bones to feed its agriculture." Were human bones used? When there is a commodity shortage and the price is high, who knows? Britain was importing 30,000 tons of bones annually. They had to be coming from somewhere. We do know that cats were used. Not just any cats, but mummified ancient Egyptian cats. Whether or not they were originally imported with fertilizer in mind, they were bought by a bone crusher for fertilizing the crops. There were stories that more than Egyptian cat mummies were finding their way into the ground. Alas, again, I can find no more than newspaper reports on this. So whilst the British populace were possibly re-ingesting war horses, ancient Egyptians, fallen heroes and cats, supposedly to improve their diet, the scientists were hard at work. The discovery that coprolites, that's dinosaur crap to you and me, would, when treated, yield high-grade sulfates, generated a little mining boom across a narrow strip of the east of England, which was where NOAA had buried the ancient dinosaurs. Dinosaur crap was dug out of the earth, crushed, treated, and added to the British diet. But we were not done yet. Again, in the early 19th century, Humboldt brought a sample of Peruvian guano back to Europe. Certain seabirds enjoy nesting in their own crap. They roost on small islands, safe from mainland predators, and poop away to their heart's content. Climate change over time does alter the latitude suitable for guano deposition. It needs to be dry. And falling sea levels, or rising land levels on the western South American coast, had seen previously isolated island roosts find themselves bridged to the mainland. The Incas had exploited the abandoned guano sites on the coast, and also rowed out to the guano islands. When the Europeans got wind of the guano, and many millions of tons of guano has a definite wind, they wanted it. The Chincha Islands of Peru were the place to get the bird poop. There it was found in mounds 150 feet deep. Needless to say, no one wanted to dig the stuff out, and so convicts and African slaves were initially used. Conditions on these islands, which were poop all the way to the bedrock, were atrocious. To help them out, British press gangers went on the hunt in China, signing impoverished Chinese up to work on the US railroads or service the boom towns of the Californian gold rush. They instead shipped them across to the Chincha Islands. There were only a few thousand of the tens of thousands of Chinese slaves shipped to the Americas employed in the guano trade, but few would have had it worse than them. Britain didn't care much. When Spain went to war between 1864 and 1866 with its former colonies of Peru, Chile, Ecuador and Bolivia occupying the Chincha Islands at the off, Britain's concern was that we would still be getting our needed bird poop. The poop was responsible for 60% of Peru's income in the period at its peak. In 40 years they'd exported 14 million tons of their poop and earned around $15 billion in today's money. Chile, Peru and Bolivia fell out again in 1879 over the bird poop, but the Chincha Islands were almost exhausted by now and Peru's heyday of shoveling shit was at an end. The USA was not silent through all this. Bird crap was useful for fertilizer and as a source of saltpeter, and Britain was at the front of the queue for Peru's poo. So in 1856 the US Congress passed the Guano Islands Act. This was not an idle act, with over 100 islands being claimed for the US under it, the vast majority of them in the Pacific. But there is one Pacific guano island which stands out in history, and that is Nauru. Nauru is the smallest republic in the world. You can cycle around it in under 2 hours. It's a ring atoll on which phosphate was discovered in 1900. Germany took possession of the atoll in 1886, which annoyed the 1,000 locals who thought it was theirs. After World War I, Nauru was given to Britain, Australia and New Zealand, not by the locals of course, and these three began to seriously mine. In 1968, Nauru finally gained independence and control over their own resources. The money poured in at the rate of 100 to 120 million Australian dollars a year to a population of just a couple of thousand. The locals didn't have a clue what to do with their wealth. They sat back and grew fat, letting others do the work and wasting the profits. A trust fund was set up to bank the profits, and this reached $1 billion Australian dollars at its peak, but bad management, fraud and outright theft saw the island bankrupted. They're now left with a moonscape for an island, existing on the thin strip around the edge, and their poop mine near exhausted. They now rely on Australians for charity, which comes with some strings. For instance, when the Aussies convinced the tiny island to take a boatload of Afghan refugees, which Australia didn't fancy importing themselves. And not to leave the Irish out, the Irish potato famine, which is thought to have cost 1 million lives, was caused by the import of Peruvian bird poo. Phosphates are a fossil fuel. Once they're gone, they are gone. They took many thousands of years to deposit and just a couple of hundred years to dig up, to put on the ground and for you to eat. Thank you for watching.